Hey guys, if y'all haven't signed in, please do so. Try to take attendance.
Did the thing not go up yet?
What?
Qualtrics thing?
Sorry, this has not started.
Should be up. I set it for 6:40 to start. Yeah, we're trying to figure that out right now.
Right now?
Right now?
Is it live now?
That's the one I typed in. Also, this thing's not looping. It's not looping.
Get John.
Get John.
There's just no winning. You want to?
Still trying to figure out why the Qualtrics is not working. Huh? Qualtrics is not working.
Qualtrics?
Right. I think it's not started for some reason.
This has not started. Yikes.
I set it for 6:40. I don't know why it's not.
Where is? Oh, do you have access to Qualtrics?
Yeah.
You could probably just remove
How
the.
do you do a hard refresh? How do you do a hard refresh?
Oh, so it is
the
up now?
expiration entirely.
Oh,
Can you
okay.
pull it up? I wonder if we had the wrong year or something. I don't think so.
I don't think I put that. Okay. We're good now. I'm just hoping my display's playing nicely with me.
You had plenty of. You had one of the rich tech meetings. You got
It's mostly I just set up the morning monitors today, so.
okay.
What's up?
Like working.
Yeah.
Do you want to say a quick prayer to the demo gods?
That's good. Fast.
Yeah, subscribe a Quran, anything, any and all, you know?
Is pizza ready?
Huh?
It's ready? It's good?
No, he's come back.
Oh, okay. Some scrub, let me see. Ooh, rough. Live stream started, so that's good. No problems there.
You have the camera up?
Yeah, should be loading here, but I mean, that's.
I always get so excited for this now.
What?
I always get really excited for these talks.
I get more anxious.
You are presenting, so.
Yeah. I know while I'm talking, I get more anxious because I get.
Yeah, I get more anxious too, but I also start drinking like a ton of coffee before these things. So
I don't like coffee.
I like coffee, but it's not really about that. It's more about I'm not actually really social with these people. So.
Yeah. I was able to log into it. He stole our pizza.
I gave him the signature he ran.
That's so rich. The pizza delivery guy stole the pizza he delivered to us.
What do you guys sign for?
Leave it on the routine for a bit.
Sure. There.
Okay, so we fixed the survey. It's open now. If you'll please sign in.
I did, but she's not.
We broke the survey. It's fixing.
Yeah.
Someone will please navigate to this URL and feel free to go to your bank account.
Isn't that cookies?
Nail cookies.
I don't know what
This is
it,
how
I don't know what it did to the project. I remember I set it for 30th, started at 6:45 p.m. I don't know what I did. I fucking broke it.
I have this whole spiel like I want to give. Being like, please sign in with the link. You know, go ahead and browse on Facebook, browse everything. We're just kidding. We don't sell your data. We give it to the CIA. Because that would be
We're narcs.
we talk the truth. Like, don't worry, we don't sell you.
Only half of us are feds.
Just like the no context of that just makes it,
That's why I'm just like, don't worry. You can browse all your social media. You can figure it out. Okay.
in fact, we encourage it.
Post here right now. We're not DHA rules.
Go ahead. Yes. What's your mother's maiden name, by the way?
We'll just put the DHA rules up like.
It is interesting, actually.
Don't let's talk like Anchor.
I almost
Guess what we forgot to do?
my friends like so funny.
Oh, I already did it. I didn't forget this time. I forgot last time.
Same.
I think all of us forgot to log in last time.
Most officers didn't we like have to? I think someone had to manually add like all the officers.
I didn't care. Where's this guy with the pizza? Man, he's a real amateur.
I know. That's what I'm saying. It's like I'm pretty sure he must have parked in like green space.
Either that or we want to like just get them started. Then, like, how many is he bringing still?
Like another half of that. Like,
Well, man, at least
half the pizzas.
try to get them started and just have them waiting here. Want to get them started right now while waiting on the other pizzas?
That's just, it's gonna make it.
Well, I
it's
mean,
gonna
start
make
on
it-
the pizza.
It's gonna make it hell when it comes to I mean, we could start doing announcements.
Yeah.
You want to do that?
Good. So there is a unattended laptop where I'm sitting, and my friend said they didn't see anyone leave it there.
Ooh, sounds juicy.
I felt that I was like,
You passed the security test.
Yeah.
Good job. Thank you for reporting us.
I don't know. I think he's coming right
Is
now.
it like beeping? Is it beeping
no, it's
faster?
like it's like some kind of thing.
We'll just like, no, we're still there.
No.
What?
Yeah, bring it here.
That's not true.
Oh wait.
It's-
Oh yeah.
I'm sure. So I told him to bring it here. I know, but Nick's up here. Yikes.
I was supposed to say, I was like, that doesn't make much sense. He's up there. Oh yeah, we just put it over here. Now let's get this one.
Go ahead and tell him, the owner of the thing is having class for your lecture on.
I'll announce it when we get this started. Or at least when I come.
Well, I'm doing PR.
If you signed in already, you guys can come up and get some pizza. Also, if anybody forgot a big pad in here, this is your big pad. Please come up here. Right there. Put it under lock. It's my ghetto lock.
Ghetto lock is right.
Good luck getting it out of there.
The owner of the person who
If you left this unattended, please leave. You failed.
It's actually what I would do. Actually, this is what I would do. Just for the sake of, in case it's somebody's.
Not the scratches.
I would say, yeah, scratch it. I'm going to say, put it away, and then just if you want to make an announcement.
Well, hopefully I remember that this is here.
Oh, I won't forget. And then you can just say, like,
I never forget.
I never forget, especially.
Is there a lesson found in ECS? I know there's one in the library. I don't know what ECS.
What's that?
ECS have a lesson found?
Yes.
We do.
Always.
I did not know that. Nice to meet you.
Right?
You're a good spokesman for CC's.
It's delicious. Eat up, guys.
CC's delicious pizza. Congrats on it.
Yeah.
Would you like a slice? Hey, buddy. You want a slice?
Nobody mentioned how IEEE has free canes right now.
Well, they get,
And everyone's heads turn.
they get a little bit more funding than we do since they're a national organization.
We're funded by the CIA.
Yes. I know. We've muted it. Shouldn't be able to. No, I muted it.
I can hear.
That doesn't make any sense. I'm not getting any feedback right now. Yeah, it should be muted. Shouldn't be any audio.
Going for the ASMR.
Mic check. Plus, I don't know. So I'm gonna mute this either. Everybody did.
Go to the CSG ASMR challenge.
So you're in OBS.
Go ahead and mute it.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So it's bypassing that.
I could dig into it. I can't really hear anything.
I imagine it still bypasses that too.
I don't know why it's doing that.
You don't have to
We're just checking.
Franco. Come back there.
Sign in.
Sold out.
How many slices can we get?
We should have enough of that.
Start with 2.
Yeah.
There'll be more. And you can come back if you're hungry. Like,
Peckish.
Vice President is so good. I like that too.
Thanks, dude. Yeah, I don't, that is really
he's a good buffer.
I hope that he can dimming down the decibels down to the thing.
The problem is that the gain is set to 2 infinities right now.
Yeah, I don't know why. Did it change?
It's still.
I've never seen it do that.
The only way is I would have to really just remove it and add it back in when I start.
I mean,
might be something I have to play with later.
I mean, it looks like the gate is moving, so.
Yeah, I did see that. I don't know.
Someone called your name. What's your name? Yes.
Wait.
Now, there. Okay. Okay. I think we're gonna get started right now. So, welcome everybody back to the CSG group. Back for another week. And this week we're going to do Intro to Bash, one of the very basic skills that most security people should probably have, since a lot of the stuff you have to interact with is Linux. The audio? I will try to announce it a little bit louder then. Okay, so first few announcements. We're going to do Fire Talks again this semester. If you were here last semester, you probably saw that we did Fire Talks. We have you guys come up here and talk to us, present something that you know, something that you've done this semester or maybe a previous semester, just something that you think is cool, and you get to come up here and talk. We have a sign-up link that's up here. That QR code will actually also go to that link. So go up there, present your idea. We'll leave that up there for, I think, maybe 3 or 4 weeks or so. Then we'll take it down, look at who we want, and then we'll email you guys the actual people who are going to present and let you know that you will be presenting at the Fire Talks. Also, next week, there is no meeting. Since it is the first Wednesday of the month, we go to DHA, which is Dallas Hackers Association. It's a fun group that we go to. We don't go as CSGs, just some of the officers and members of CSG like to go to this event. It's a good event to go to. It's kind of like the Fire Talks that we do here, but people in the Dallas area come to this event. They come speak about something they've done in their career, or maybe they've done in their free time. People do crazy things. It's a lot of fun, and it's good if you don't know any security as well. You get to come see what people are doing, maybe find something interesting, maybe you look into it more. Also, SOC Battle is coming up. Is one of the CTFs that we advertise is a 2-month CTF that's focused on defense. So the challenges are going to be defensive oriented, other than except instead of the traditional Jeopardy type of CTF. So we're going to be trying to take part of that during this semester as well. Any questions before I go on? Anything? Cool. All right. So, like I said, this meeting today is the beginning of our Introduction to Cybersecurity series, and we will be doing Introduction to Bash, the Born Again shell. So, what we're going to be going over is, again, what is Bash? What can we do with it? Why are we making it so important that we learn this? And some common things, and then I will go into a quick demo of me running around into the Bash through the Linux file system, showing off some neat commands, showing off some custom scripts, and some of the capabilities that you can actually do when you utilize Bash. And then in the end, I'll give you some resources and some further learning that you could possibly do after this. So we'll start off with, what is Bash? The Born Again shell, and I am not talking about Jason Bourne. It is actually the successor to the Bourne shell, which was a shell back in 1989. This succeeded it and is actually the most common login shell for majority of Linux systems. If you install Ubuntu, Fedora, any type of Arch distro, most of the time, the default shell you're going to have in there is Bash, and is one of the really easiest ones. There's many different other types of shells that are different types of Bash, but most commonly you're going to run into Bash. Bash is a command processor. And a command processor is a way to interact with a computer program, also known as our command line interface, which is that black box that usually pops up that you type into. And it runs a command language, and a command language is used for job control and runs. And Bash is running that command language, which is the types of commands that you input into your machine when you're typing into a terminal. Like I said, it's the most common. That's why we kind of emphasize why people really need to learn Bash. So what can we do? You talk all this hype up, sounds exciting, but what can you actually do with it? Well, you basically do pretty much everything you could do if you had some kind of GUI. You can run through the file system, edit anything, find whatever you need in there. You can monitor the processes on your machine to see what are you actually running. Is there something running in the background that I don't know? You can edit your system configurations through the files on the actual machine. You can parse the content of the files. So if you've got a big system log, you're only looking for events from a certain time, you can parse all the contents of that file and get exactly what you're looking for. And you can also run custom scripts. So it's kind of like Python C, where you write up a quick script and you run it through your compiler and it does what it needs to do. You can also do that with Bash. You can basically write a file that has a bunch of Bash commands in it, and you can run it in succession to do a certain kind of action that you're actually wanting to, and etc. There's so many things you can do with Bash. It's kind of the controlling area when you're running through any type of Linux system. So why Bash? Why do I want to learn this crap? I like GUIs. I don't want to look at a bunch of text. Why do I need to do this? Well, it's fast and efficient. In the security field, we kind of have to be on our toes. This field changes every single day with new vulnerabilities coming out, new patches coming out. You kind of have to be on your edge and implement the most efficient method of getting your data. And being able to, instead of having to write another script through maybe a C or a Python, you can run straight through Bash. You don't have to worry about having the right dependencies and such like that. It will run straight into the actual kernel of the machine, and it'll be the most efficient way to actually get your data from your machine. And secondly, there's no need for a complicated GUI. Security people most of the time do not like GUIs. We prefer text views because it gets us the most stuff and it's not really complicated. We just want to see what we want to see, and we don't have to develop some crazy graphics for our programs. We just want something to run in the terminal, gets me what I need. I don't want to see pretty pictures. So you don't have to actually go in and develop some crazy GUI for your bash stuff. You can just run a terminal and you'll be able to get whatever you need. Also, there are such things as GUI-less operating systems. There are many Linux distros that offer a headless Linux install. So that means it's going to be a Linux server that has no desktop or no any kind of graphical desktop. It's just going to be a pure command line. When you log into the machine, you're just going to be dropped right into a shell. So if you don't really know how to run around around bash, you're going to kind of have a hard time if you get into the corporate environment and you're told to log into a machine and you can't see anything. You can only see your terminal. Also, verbosity. Again, as security people, we need to know all the details. If I'm the incident response person and we have an incident come out, I need to get all the details I need on that incident and be able to report it. So in a command prompt, or a command line, I can dump as much information as possible. I can fill up my text screen. I can have as much data and I can export it out from those files and be able to give it to my supervisor and give them the most information they need to be able to get their job done. Also, portability is also a good thing. Almost every single operating system is going to have some form of bash except for Windows because they're weird. So if you write something in bash, it's much easier to take that script, put it onto another machine, and have a better chance of it actually running. If you write something in C or Python, you got to worry about dependencies. You got to make sure you got the right compiler. It kind of runs into a little bit more overhead. And if you have a machine in the corporate environment that you're not allowed to install anything else on, like you can't install Python, you're not allowed to install C on it, you might run into a little bit of headway. And that's why bash comes very in handy in that sense. So what kind of commands are we kind of looking at? So these are some of the most common ones that I thought off the top of my head. Some people might have some other ones, but these are probably the ones I use the most often. So we got ls, which lists everything in the current directory you're working in. cd, which changes different directories into your file system. cat will print out the contents of a file. So you have a text file or a Word document, you do cat on that file and it should print everything out to your standard output. Echo just prints out a string. You can print strings out into files. We'll probably go into that a little bit later. Less will actually let you read out files into a text viewer. Very important one is man. So there are a lot of commands in bash. There is really hard to learn them all. And from time to time, you might forget things about them. You might forget the flags or how to use it properly. That's where man kind of comes in. You can type man and whatever the name of the command is, it'll bring up a manual page and it'll tell you what the command does, what the type of flags are, what kind of errors you can run into, and it should give you all the information that you possibly need about it. And another big one is sudo. So typically when you're running on a machine, you're running on a user level account that has certain permissions. Well, sometimes when you try to edit some certain files on the system, it's going to tell you you're not cool enough to do that. You need cooler permissions. So that's when sudo comes into play. Sudo will elevate your permissions to run a certain command at a root level. And root is basically, in a sense, like the Windows administrator of a Linux machine. It has pretty much all the permissions to do anything to the machine. All right, so we'll go to the demo and we'll hack them up, as we say in the CSG lab. Okay. All right, so, oh, yeah, my bad, I got carried away. Does knowing, all right, one question I got was, does knowing bash help you automate your systems? It can. So a lot of people make some customized scripts to automate updates on a machine, because a lot of times when you set up servers, you probably set up immediately, and once you're done kind of working with it, and if it does something automatically, you probably won't touch that machine for probably 3 or 4 months because you'll probably forget about it. So people write custom scripts to automatically update machines. I've written scripts to automatically scan a bunch of IP addresses on the subnet before. So yeah, it's very good to automatically do automated tasks on. Got another one. Let's do this. Sorry. What about PWD? PWD is displays your current working directory. So when you're running around your bash, you're in a file or a directory when you're running through it. PWD will print your current working path, so the path all the way from the base root directory to where you're currently working in. What distro is that? That's Monero. It's a Arch-based Linux distro. I don't suggest taking it on. It's a pain in the butt because you have to set up everything yourself. I learned that the hard way. Okay. All right. So I am now in a. Oh, sorry.
Bigger.
Bigger. Oh crap.
Can't read. Control Shift plus.
No, that's not it. Yeah.
This is Monero for you.
Yeah, that's the one thing. You have to give me a second then. Sorry, 1 second. Let me pump this up. Crap. Sorry. Yep, that's what I know. Okay. Is that better? Anybody can't see that or need a little bit bigger? Bigger? I'm just going to bump this up to like 35. What? All right. Can everybody see this? This is why you don't do Monero, because it's a pain in the butt to change settings sometimes. All right. So, I know. Jesus in the flesh right here. Okay. So I'm in a terminal right now. As you can probably see, it's got some stuff on the screen. The first thing inside the brackets is my username, whatever kind of user account you're logged into. And at the machine name, I'm on a HP Spectre. That's why it's called Spectre. And then you probably see that little squiggly line. That is the shortcut to the current user's home directory. I'll probably be using that, but I'll probably do a little bit of a little crash course on the Linux file system real fast, just in case anybody doesn't know it. But the base directory of the Linux file system is the / directory. So I want to look at what's in this directory. I'll do ls. I'll do -l for a long format so I can see everything about the files in here. I'll do A to show every single file, even the hidden files in the system. So when I do this, it's going to show me a bunch of files. So this is the base of the file system. You got your bin directory, which holds most of your commands. You got an etc directory, which holds your configurations for a Linux system. The root directory is a separate directory for the root user. And you have other ones like the system file for the operating system. So just going through the file system real fast, in that far left corner over here, you probably see a bunch of letters R, W, and X. These are the file permissions for these certain directories or files on the system. So R means I have permission to read this. W means I have permission to write to this file. X means I have permission to execute this file. And it's broken up to 3 different sections for user, group, and I forget the third one. Oh, yeah, other. And I'm not going to go too much into that. And we have who owns the file, what kind of group can access the file, and how big that file is. So there's kind of a lot of information that you can actually grab from your file system. So there's a lot of things that we can do in bash. So if I want to go back to my home directory, I would do cd to the tilde, and now I'm back into my home directory. So I got a bunch of different files I'm going to go to. So I'll go to my demo file fast. And if you're doing cd and you're moving through files, you do tab, it'll give you suggestions on what you can actually go to. So I'm going to go to CSG, to my bash demo. All right. So I got a couple demo files in here. Sorry. So when you're on a machine, sometimes you may be doing some kind of maintenance on it. I would say a useful command is to kind of look at what's actually running on the machine. So if I do psaux, that's going to show me all the running process on the machine. It's going to look kind of clunky because of the text size. But it's a good way to see what's kind of running on the machine to figure out, hey, is something going wrong in this machine right now? May I need to look into something? But it kind of leads into something I wanted to talk about called piping. That's kind of where the big strong suit from bash comes from, is from piping commands. And what I mean by this is when I run a command on here, you probably see everything come to this terminal and it prints out everything. Piping means that when I run a command, I want to take that output and run it into another command and basically condense it down. So if I want to look at all the processes and I'm going to pipe it into a command called grep. Grep is basically going to take that text output and look for a certain string, grab that and print it out to the console. So let's say I want to look for process 8458. It's going to highlight which ones match that actual command, and it's going to print those out to the screen. This is good for if I have a large log file that's probably, let's say, 2 million entries long, and I'm looking for a certain timestamp or maybe a certain user that logged in. I can cat that file out to my console and then grep for that certain string that I'm looking for. It kind of helps parsing through a bunch of files. If I need to print a report out to someone, I can grep certain things that I need to get to them and put that out to a file. And I will go. Sorry guys, I'm just kind of getting into it. Monero-like hacker cryptocurrency. No, not that. How do you get help for commands? So help for commands is the man page that I talked about. So if I do man ls, it's going to bring up basically like a little mini manual in your command prompt, and it's going to tell you a little bit more about that command. So it's going to tell you that it lists directory contents, it's going to tell you what kind of options, give you a description, and then it's going to describe all the flags that you could possibly put in front of that command to change what kind of output it's going to give to you. Is -LA the same as -L-A? Yeah, I just combined some commands you're allowed to combine flags under a single dash, but separating them would basically do the same thing. How do you configure AD as a provider for SSFD? I don't know. Sorry. Okay. All right. So one of the big strong suits I mentioned before is making a lot of custom scripts. So you can combine a bunch of these commands I'm typing into the terminal right now, put them into a file, and then run them as a single command. So I made a couple scripts, and I imported one right here. So I made this grader script, and it's not something really useful, but it's basically going to tell me if a number I put in is greater than 10. And if I do that, that number's not greater than 10, it's equal to 10, sorry. So if we actually look at this file real fast, we'll kind of see how the file structure of a bash script works. So in the beginning, we have this # exclamation point. That's kind of a preprocessor command. It's going to tell you, before you start running anything in this script, make sure you're running it with bin bash. So it doesn't kind of get confused and try to use something else to try to run these commands and error out. So in the beginning, when I run the script, it echoes this text to the screen saying, enter a number. Then I ask it to read in a number. So once you put in a number, I store that into a variable called value. And then I check if that value is greater than 10, then print that one string out. Else does the other output, finish. Something real simple, just a simple if statement. The syntax is going to be kind of a little weird. It's a little finicky and it's kind of ugly a lot of the time. I don't really like it a lot of the time, but it's just kind of something we have to deal with. I have another one called file check. So what this one is going to do is going to search through every single file starting at a certain directory and tell me when's the last time that this file was modified. This one's a little bit involved. I'll kind of try to go through it as best as I can. So again, we start with our bin bash comment at the top. We start our base directory of my home directory because I don't want to do the whole file system. That would take way too long. It's about over 1 million or 500,000 files. I start an array of the files. I want to keep them to print later on. Now I'm just going to do a kind of an odd looking for loop. So I'm doing a for loop on this current file, which we're going to store the file that I'm looking at. And then it's going to do $find this command. So in a bash script, if you want to take the output of a command, you run this in a $parentheses. So basically this $parentheses, I'm running the find command at my base directory looking for any file name with any extension. And that's basically going to be piped into my for loop variable right here, every iteration of my for loop. And then what I do is I grab the current time, and then I do something a little bizarre right here. So I grab the date of the current file, and then I do to greater than /dev/null. So if you're not super familiar with Linux systems have streams that output stuff. So you got your output stream, you got a null stream, and you got a standard error. So when you do normal commands, echoing stuff will go to your standard output, which will go to your terminal. There is such thing as standard error. So any type of error that a command will run into will be piped into that output stream. And there's one called /dev/null, which basically pipes it into oblivion. Like this is for stuff like, this is just in case I get an error, as in I'm trying to get the date of a file that it found but got deleted before I could run this command on it. So it's going to run, if I get any errors, get rid of them. I don't care to look at them. You're just going to make my life harder. So that's what I kind of do. And then we format the time, and then we basically print it out to the screen. So also I forgot. Typically when running a script, you're going to do // which means you're going to try to execute a script in either current directory or a further down directory if you give a bigger path. So we're going to do this. It's going to take a couple seconds to run. And there we go. So it's going to print out a bunch of file names, and it's basically going to tell me these files were modified so on so long ago. This may not be super useful on an actual production machine because it's not very thorough rolled out, but I'm going to actually show you a more well-written script that I didn't write. So when we do penetration testing, there are certain steps that we do. One of them is called enumeration, which is basically trying to get more information on your target. So when you get onto a machine, if it's a Linux machine, you kind of want to know more about what's running on the machine without having to go run all these commands. I don't remember the guy that made this, but he made this script called linenum, which is basically going to grab all the information from my machine right now and try to present them in a way so I can look through this report and try to figure out, is there some kind of point I can pivot out of this machine? So if I run it's going to put out a lot to the screen. And this is a much more well-written script. I did not write this. This guy is much better than I am. I'll just cut it out right there. But basically, as we see, it's running through my machine trying to find some kind of information that might be useful for me. So it might find it's looking for the sudo version, maybe there's vulnerability in the sudo command, any kind of interesting files that maybe I can leverage to do something for me. I could probably leverage GCC to try to escalate myself up. These are the These are binaries with permissions that I allowed to execute. It prints out a lot of information, and it's very useful if you try to get into pen testing. If you're going to do any kind of pen testing, this is probably one of the scripts you're going to be more into. But this is just kind of a quick glimpse of what Bash can really do for you. It's a very powerful thing to leverage if you know how to use it well. It seems very daunting at first since there's a lot of commands in Bash, and scripting for it is kind of confusing. But if you run around a Linux system long enough, you'll probably kind of pick up on some things. And if you actually start trying to write some scripts, you'll get a little bit better at it, and it might come a little bit easier to you trying to use these commands. Let me check the questions real fast. Actually, let me do this. Okay. How does Bash compare to other scripting languages such as Ruby, Perl, and Python? I would say it compares to it. It has some pros and cons. Con is these languages are probably a little bit easier to write for in terms of scripting. The syntax is a little bit more friendlier. They have more libraries available to you. Bash is a little bit better if you have a machine that you don't have access to these types of things. It's easier to access into the machine than through some of these languages, since some of these languages you might need some kind of API wrapper to actually access, like maybe some kernel functions and such like that. So it has its pros and cons. I say it's good to learn all of them just to know them. Can you write a large-scale program in Bash? I mean, if you really want to, dude, I don't recommend it. You'll probably regret it afterwards. There are large-scale scripts in Bash, like Linenum is a very large-scale script. It just takes a while to do. If you're trying to write something large-scale, I would probably vouch for probably something more like Python or so. But if you're trying to write like a real quick script to do something on a machine, you're trying to automate some like small process, I'd probably recommend going with Bash. So over-the-wire bandit, good for learning Bash? Yes. If you don't know, over-the-wire is a website/service that basically offers kind of like a little game in learning Bash. So you got different levels that you go through, and it's going to teach you small commands in Bash every single level. I highly recommend it. If you're just learning Bash, it's good for learning types of commands and how to use them properly. What is a hanging script? If I'm understanding this correctly, a hanging script is a script that will probably not terminate if you try to run on something and it just can't find an exit. It's probably just going to sit there and hang and just lag or just hold your terminal pretty much hostage until it tries to finish. At that point, you're probably going to have to kill that process. If it's running in the terminal, you can kill it in the terminal. If it's a running process in the background, you're probably going to have to find the process ID of that command or that process and kill it. Okay. All right, so other resources and topics. So I just put down some things that might be kind of useful to learn or kind of look into more once you get a little bit better at Bash. Piping is still one of the biggest things. A lot of times you're going to use one command together or a multitude of commands together. So learning how to use pipes correctly and realizing what output you're putting into another command is very useful. The other one is backgrounding processes. So when you saw me run that the file check script, you saw it kind of hang there and kind of sit there. Sometimes you might have a process that you don't want hanging in a terminal. So if I try to start Firefox, I don't want it holding my terminal hostage. I kind of want to let it go and kind of run on its own. That's what backgrounding means. So basically having it run in the background and not me having to monitor it. So learning how to do that would be another useful tool. This one's not very bash centered, but this is good for Linux package managers. Every single distro I know of has some kind of weird package manager. Mine has Pacman. I still don't really know how to use it. It's just bizarre to me. But learning how to use that correctly is very useful because you got a lot of different types of tools that other people have made that you might want to install onto your system that might help you do your work later on. Also, to a fact, the guy, whoever asked the question about the automating scripts, cron tabs is kind of where that's at. A cron tab is a part of the Linux system that runs a script at a certain time or a certain interval. So I can run a script every 30 minutes, or I can designate a script to run the first day of the month every month. It's very useful if you're trying to have a machine that maybe generates a report for you. Maybe you only want it to generate a report every month. So you said the first day of every month, and it will only do it for that. It'll only run that script for that first day. Command flags. It's good to know some command flags. Not all of them you're going to be able to possibly know, but being able to understand what that flag is asking for you or what it's trying to do is useful when you're trying to use a multitude of commands. And back to resources, Over-the-Wire, like I mentioned, good resource, very good way to learn Bash if you don't really know it. Immersive Labs is also a good source. They actually have tutorials in a lot of different tools. They do have a section specifically on Bash, and it has you typing into an interactive terminal, trying to solve their challenges and questions. All right, let me check. Anybody got any questions or anything like that? Got one question is, how do you kill a command that won't end? Most of the time, the hotkey is Control-C. Some people might change that, but most of the time I know it's Control-C. Is Over-the-Wire a good place to learn other scripting languages? Someone might have to confirm. I don't think it has anything other than Bash. I don't think it does.
I think that's in the web.
Oh.
So,
I only know the Bash part, but I don't know if it has anything else. Then someone said, hang versus fork bomb. If I remember this correctly, I'm pretty sure a fork bomb is when your process keeps forking off into other processes and it doesn't stop eating up all your memory on your machine. Hanging is a single process that just hangs there and it won't stop. A fork bomb typically creates a bunch of processes and eventually will probably crash your machine. That's kind of the main difference between those, if I understand your question correctly. Any other questions? Okay, just another quick note. We are doing resume critiques after this with the officers. If you do have a resume and you do want one of us to look over it, we will do that for you. And again, no meeting next week. And if that's it, that's all I got for you guys.
Send me a YouTube link.
Thank you.
It took me a second to figure out what that song times meant, and I was like, oh.